Thank you for joining me today. It's Brian Gubernick, and welcome to the No Days Off podcast, where we believe that every single day brings a new opportunity to get better. If you've been listening to the No Days Off podcast for a little while, and I know a lot of you have, you know that we're normally 5 to call it 12 minutes an episode, where every day we're looking to get better at something. Well, a handful of months ago, as you're aware, we started doing a long form interview here and there with an incredibly high achiever, an entrepreneur, somebody that we could all learn something from. And today we're going to do another one of those interviews. And I am honored to have as my guest here at No Days Off, Marc Hodulich, who is the CEO of 29029. If you've been part of my world in any capacity, via this podcast or through metrics or just through the industry, you had to have heard of 29029 by now. If not, you've been living under a rock. Because I believe that 29029, and Marc's going to describe it a bit to us, and we're going to talk about his journey here in a moment. I believe that what they've done over there at 29029 through Marc's leadership, the program itself, the event is absolutely amazing. And it's impacted hundreds, if not thousands of lives now. And I want to talk to Marc today to learn more about 29029, but his journey as an entrepreneur, as a businessman, as a father, as a husband. And so without further ado, Marc, thank you for joining me here today.
Brian, thanks for having me, man. I'm fired up to chat with you, my friend.
So if for some crazy reason somebody doesn't know what 29029 is, can you give us a synopsis? Can you give us kind of the general overview?
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm humbled by the introduction. I'll tell you, look, we're still quite small. I mean, we have 8 events at the best ski resorts across North America. And this is a concept me and my partners, Jesse Itzler and Colin O'Brady, started back in 2017 to really challenge people so intensely they had an opportunity to evolve into the best version of themselves. But our original idea was like, look, where can we take our skill sets, our connections, our reputation, and do $1 million event in a weekend? And work backward from what is that amazing story that people are going to want to tell, where we can bundle a lot of services together and create this lifetime experience. It's like, what's better than saying you're going to climb the equivalent of Mount Everest? And that's really what we're doing at 29029, which stands for 29,029 feet. We run a ski resort. We train you. We put you up at a great hotel or luxury glamping site. We include all of your training, all of your food, massage therapy on site. And then you have 36 hours to hike one of the mountains that we rent, take the gondola down and repeat it until you hopefully climb 29,029 feet. And we're doing them everywhere from like Jackson Hole to Whistler to Sun Valley and even Aspen this year. So we're at like the best resorts, but it's not an easy thing to do. It's simple. You just walk up the mountain, hike up the mountain and take a gondola down, but it's really damn hard.
Oh, it's hard as hell now. I've had an opportunity to do Snow Basin. I've done Whistler with you guys. I did your trail event, which was new.
Yep.
A new addition last year. I don't care who you are, right? Like it is hard. And I know a big thing for you is, and your partners, it's a you versus you type of thing. Like it's not a race, which I think is really interesting because most anything that I've ever participated in, there's a clock and you're vying for the fastest time that you can possibly get. But that's not exactly what you guys do here.
Yeah, I think the opportunity that I saw was that when I did an Ironman, what my goal was to complete the Ironman. And while I did rather well, I wasn't trying to win my age group, nor were 90% of the other people. And then I did a 100-miler. And I think there were probably 5 people in the 100-miler I did at Leadville that were like trying to win something. You know, it's got a 35% finisher rate. Most people are just trying to finish a damn thing, right? And what I realized is like when you get in these ultra endurance events, it's really about your own growth through that process, right? It's your own journey, and that you don't really care about beating other people, right? You want to be present in what you're going through, and if anything, you're helping other people. But those races are not set up to support other people, right? It's not meant to build a community. It's still about your time relative to everyone else. And so I think the aha moment was a little bit like, hey, when you're doing these ultra endurance events, being able to lean into a community and not compete against them is really beneficial. And that's really what we created at 29. I mean, you take our brand with a cattle branding iron and burn it into a board. You keep your own score of how many hikes up the mountain you've done, right? It's truly self-scored. It's truly you versus you, but you're not in it alone, right? you're not comparing yourself to other people. You're hiking with them and sharing that space and time with them. And that's truly what I've loved is the community aspect that we built around it.
Yeah, there's so much to unpack there, and we're going to get into it. And our audience, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of people building things, uh, they run into hard. Like there's a lot of hard out there, right? As an entrepreneur, you get some wins, you get some losses, and I think at the end of the day, you're just trying to come out with one or two more W's than you have L's, but you get your butt kicked along the way. And one thing that I know when you talk about Ironman, you talk about 100 mile, you talk about 29 and it's a concept we talk here at No Days Off quite a bit around. Uh, this idea of just doing hard things and what you learn about yourself when you're kind of pushing yourself to that limit. I know that that's a lot of the philosophy that you, Jesse, Colin, you guys have. Like you want to create an environment that makes you rather uncomfortable, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, sleep deprivation and hunger are incredible tools to find out what you're made of and have some clarity of thought, right? And those things happen in an ultra endurance event, but you're not able to push your body or mind to get to that place unless you flex kind of that grit muscle for weeks, months, or even years before getting there, right? And so I think it is about doing hard things, right? No days off, right? Every single day as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you're facing those things constantly. And I think something like 29 and 29 is to say, hey, look, put a big physical and mental goal out there aside from your business, right? Aside from financial goals. Have something you're working towards that balances your life out with a wellness component, introduces newness, right? Like I'm learning the guitar right now. And it is unbelievably hard to try to learn something at 44 years old. It would have been much easier to learn the guitar, I'm sure, when I was 6 or 8. But that newness is exciting, right? And you get those breakthroughs. And those are the types of things that I think 29 on 29 is really creating an environment to try something new, learn a new skill, but every day do something hard. I tell people when they're training for it, don't use the treadmill on a day that it rains. Purposely go out and get wet, right? Like train in the worst conditions possible to harden yourself. Because if it happens at the event, you're prepared for it. And if it doesn't, things are better, right? You want training to be harder than the actual event. And I think that's what we want in business too. When the big moment comes, whether it's a deal you're trying to do, whether it's a business that you're acquiring, whether it's an exit you're leaning towards, you want all of those really hard reps that you put through to prepare you for that one moment when you need the clarity of thought, you need to think fast, you need to rely on your experience. You want to be able to perform at your highest level when it really matters. And I think that's why you have to do hard things every day because you never know when that moment's going to come and when you're going to need to rise to the occasion.
It's such good guidance. I didn't set it. I mean, you didn't know this, but a recent episode. Well, maybe you listen every day, Mark. But I'm going to assume you didn't catch this one. But in a recent episode, we were quoting Bob Dylan, and he's got a lyric where he says, you're either busy being born or you're busy dying.
Yeah.
And the idea of being born is challenging yourself every day, pushing yourself every day, choosing your heart every day. I love that you said you're learning the guitar right now. Like that's the kind of stuff we're talking about when we're saying being born. It's when was the last time you learned something new or you pushed yourself to be a bit more creative? Uh, you're busy being born. It sounds like right now. And the event is a lot of that. A lot of what you entail or what the event entails is kind of this regrowth, if you will.
Yeah, and
So
look, there's excitement that comes from that. And, I describe the mechanics of 29 and kind of the business go-to-market strategy behind it and what we're providing. But at the end of the day, we're giving people a story to tell, right? And I think that's, stories are what last um, over time. And for me, one of the biggest things is it gives you something to talk about, and that makes you more interesting, right? And those are the types of things I think you get to be proud of yourself. I think the older that we get, the more we take for granted some of our successes and things that we do. Like you're an incredibly accomplished guy, Brian. You've done so much, but you probably don't put into context just how incredible the business is that you're building or the following that you have and the mastermind you have and these different types of things. It's commonplace for you, right? It's just, that's what you do. That's who you've grown up to be. But when you do something like 29 and 29, it gives you an opportunity to be like, whoa, like I didn't know I could do that. I didn't know I could hike for 24 straight hours, right? I didn't know I had that in me. And it gives you an opportunity to kind of look at yourself in a different light. And I think that's an aha moment that people take from the mountain. They're like, well, what else can I do? why do I have these self-limiting beliefs? Where else can I take this? And it may not be strictly back to their business. Certainly it is. We've seen people watch podcasts, write books, go sober, reevaluate relationships, connect with a loved one they haven't talked to in 10 plus years where there was some barrier. And they're like, look, if I can hike for 30 hours, I can go say I'm sorry to someone, right?
Yeah.
So I think
Yeah.
it puts things in perspective around the rest of your life of like, wait, I'm capable of a lot more than I thought. Why not go and have these hard conversations or go tackle something else, put something else big on my calendar and go get it done?
I love it. I love it. One thing I want to bring up before we move on and start to really kind of learn about you, Mark, as a business person and your growth, your process. The other day, when we were chatting, and I'd love, of course, I'm transparent with the audience, Mark. I would love to say Mark and I had this pre-interview and this dial. No, we started recording a couple days ago, and my freaking Wi-Fi went out. So that was fun. But we learned and we've grown from it.
Yeah.
But when we started talking the other day, uh, you had met, and you mentioned it already. You talked about the creation of 29029. You guys had this big idea, or you asked this big question, and the big question was, how do we make $1 million in a weekend? And I think you threw it up on the board, and you and Jesse Itzler, your partner, and I don't know if Colin was there just yet. Colin O'Brady, who we've talked about quite a bit here at No Days Off, a good friend of our podcast. You guys sat down and you really started brainstorming around answering that big question. And I bring that up because we have a lot of these business owners listening to what we do here at No Days Off. I want you to talk us a little bit through that process. Like, what was the genesis of 29029 as it pertains to asking that big question? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, I mean, look, Jesse and I got to be friends, and the main thing that we were talking about was how we wanted something big on our calendar every year, but we didn't want to have to deal with all the logistics of planning it and hiring a coach and training for it and booking the hotel and all that. Like, could someone just do that for us? So the original big idea was like, look, how can we do that for other people rather than joining another country club or social club? What if you just joined like an adventure club or something like that? It was like, well, we got to start before we can ask people to pay us on an annual basis to do this for them. Let's go out and do something really big. And it was like, well, then what's worthwhile? What's really big? And we both said, well, if we made $1 million in a weekend, like that would be worthwhile, right? That would be worth our time. And then how are we going to do that? And my skill set was really high end, high touch, curated events. And I was like, well, I don't want to do it by having 10,000 people pay us, $100 or $1,000. Like, I'd rather flip the model and have a few people pay us a lot of money. Right. And so we started working that business model. And what would we do? And I think the aha was all of those friction points that we had around hiring a coach and where are we going to stay and what are we going to eat and not meeting other people and feeling like we had this amazing experience. Like my Ironman, I didn't walk away knowing one other person. Right. So let's fix all those things, right? So we put a big goal out there. We had a long-term plan, and it was like actually then executing on the short-term vision was we needed to do an event, right? We needed to host something, and just came up with the concept of Everesting, which is not new, right? I've seen people doing this on their road bikes. They'd pick a huge hill or mountain, they'd ride their bike up and then coast down and do it until they'd climb 29,029 feet on their bike and post it on Strava, which is like an endurance community, right? Social platform for endurance athletes. I was like, well, you could do that hiking if you could just remove the hiking down part, right? And that's where the gondolas came in. And I think it was just one by one, kind of checking off the barriers and also what needs we could solve for other people. And at the end of the day, I think what I think is helpful for people is like you just have to start. We didn't have most of the answers when we started, right? But we set a goal out there, we set a date, we built a brand around it, and we just did it. And it wasn't perfect. And the second one wasn't perfect. And the third one wasn't, right? But we had enough to learn from and iterate on off of our assumptions. And then you listen to feedback from your customers. So I think the journey of actually building it came from a place where we built a product we wanted ourselves. But then we got a lot of it wrong and we're willing to understand what other people wanted to fix it on a go forward basis to turn it into the business that it is today.
And when I hear you tell that story, and it's great, right? Like, I'll tell you, like, I start thinking about that, the formula that we as entrepreneurs should be leveraging in some capacity, which is, okay, what's the big problem? Right? Like, you and Jesse are saying, hey, we're endurance athletes, we love these events, but there's flaws in every one of these things that we're participating in. Maybe it's lack of community or whatever it may be. So we've got this problem, we've got these pain points. And then you guys sit down and say, okay, how do we solve for these different challenges or problems within this type of type of event? And you ultimately come up with this solution. You put the solution out like to the world, and then you continue to improve it and iterate and change the slightest bit. And I know, I don't want to air anybody out here, Mark, but I know your staff and your people would
Sure.
describe you. What word would they use? I think they use the word perfectionist. Like you care
Mhm.
about every detail. And I think a lot of that has to do with, hey, we got the solution, but we're going to constantly iterate. But
I,
you're pretty particular around the details.
Yeah, I love the fact that you chose a positive word, perfectionist.
Yeah,
Some
that's
like,
what I was working hard to find that word.
yeah, yeah. Um, Look, like, I care a lot, right? I care about my team. I care about our participants. I care about the friendships. I care about what this event means to people. We've had ashes spread on our mountains. We've had cancer diagnosed, remission celebrated. We've had engagements. We've had honeymoons. I mean, we've had it all, right? That means a lot to people. But with that comes like a lot of responsibility to deliver, right? This isn't just an endurance event for people. For some, it's one of the biggest things they've done in their life. And because of that, I think the weight that I carry is like it's got to exceed everyone's expectations. And so from that is like we have to have an unsettled feeling, right? And I think it's easy to get complacent when you've had success. I'm the opposite. Every year I have more anxiety than I did the year before around delivering the product because more people have read about it. They've seen it on Instagram, and the movie that they have playing in their head is bigger than it was for the people that did it year one and didn't know what they were getting into. And that pressure is a privilege, right? That's not my own quote. That's a quote I'm sure a lot of people here know. By I think it's a Tim Grover, who talks about is Michael Jordan's mentalist and coach. Like pressure is a privilege, right? And I have a lot of pressure to deliver, and I think the way I deliver that to my team is like, look, I care about all of them. I want to see them grow, but we don't get that opportunity unless we crush it in every single area. And so we celebrate our wins pretty quickly, and then very quickly move on to like where can we improve and get better. And I think it's look, me as a leader, I put people in a position where I want them to fail, right? But I want them to fail quickly, right? I want to put everyone, that sounds bad. I want to put everyone in a position to succeed, but I don't want them to come to approval for me on everything. So they're going to make mistakes, right? We're going to fail fast, and it's just learning from those. And it's creating that environment of like trying new things and growing, figuring out what worked and what didn't work, and then fixing it going forward. I don't want the bureaucracy and the red tape of like all these levels of approval to get to somewhere. If you give people a lot of rope, they're going to make some mistakes. And I think you have to be willing to accept those and then them accept the critique of like, hey, all right, that's not the way I would have done it. Here's how we can tweak it and get it better. Right. And I'm not going to say I'm always the one that's going to get it right, but I do have probably the best feel for the brand and the community. But I don't want me to be the stopgap for everything. So I think it's just finding that right balance as a team to where we can grow and the people on my team have the autonomy to move things forward without me.
Yeah. And since we're talking about team, I got to ask you about partnership, right?
Sure.
Again, we've got a lot of business owners here, many that have very successful partnerships, many that have maybe partnerships that are not going the direction they wish they would. Uh, you have probably two of the more interesting partners one could have. I know Colin pretty well, and he's got a different mind. And Jesse, I don't know all that well, but I think most everyone's seen Jesse Itzler pop up all over the place. The guy's pretty creative, we'll say, right? Like he's got a lot going on in his
Sure.
mind. Uh, what a dynamic the three of you have. Talk to us about building successful partnerships because I think when I observe what the three of you, you and Jesse at first, but then when we added Colin to the mix, watch the three of you work together. It is a really interesting dynamic in that you each have your kind of respective lanes and also appreciate or respect one another and what you're best at. So talk to us about what makes for a successful partnership from your perspective.
Yeah, I think it was alignment of interest very early on. You and I talked about this during our dry run the other day.
Yeah,
My answer
the
is no
dry
different,
run.
right? Um, my answer is no different. I actually took some time reflecting on it running yesterday. And I really think what works is that our goal was not to try to become the next Ironman. Our goal was not to try to sell to private equity. Our goal was not to have 50 events all over the world. It was to really have lasting impact and create a boutique luxury adventure travel company, right? And that's what we've done. And so I think from very initially, we wanted a lifestyle business, right? Jesse's got 4 kids. Colin has one. He didn't even have a son when we started, and I got 2 boys that are 13 and 15. If you asked me to describe myself, what my goals are, I want to be the most amazing dad first. Like, my goal is when my boys turn 18, I've raised the 2 best men I could possibly do. Like, that is my job until they're 18. It doesn't end when they're 18, but until they're 18, man, like, that is my number one job. So in going with Jesse, it's like, look, my goal in starting this business together and then bringing Colin on is not to maximize enterprise value or cash flow. Like, it's to maximize the impact that we can have with people, have a cash flow positive business, and then be able to be with my kids and family, right? Like, those are the goals. And so I think there's initial alignment there. And then it's really being self-aware, right? Jesse and Colin are keynote speakers that get booked time and time again, New York Times best-selling authors. That doesn't need to be me. I'm very comfortable speaking. I like welcoming people. I like being on stage. But you know what? They should have the mic. It's what their job is. But they shouldn't be writing the business plan. They shouldn't be negotiating contracts, right? They shouldn't be hiring people. They shouldn't be managing the P&L. And that's what I'm good at doing. And so I think it's a recognition of, like, hey, put people in the seats where they're at their highest and best use. And it's not always going to be an equal amount of time. But the impact that Colin can have, or the impact that Jesse can have through relationships, through their social channels, can be highly, highly effective. In the same way, it could be me launching a new product like Trail, right? Like, that affects the business in a huge way. But their ability to go out and use that as a microphone and go talk about it also impacts the business in a big way. And I think a lot of people get their own ego gets in the way of, like, well, I'm working 80 hours a week and I'm doing this. And, like, yeah, well, both of my partners combined have like 2 million followers. So think of the awareness that I get as their partner from them just naturally talking about something. And I think you have to give credit to where it's due. And it's not always going to be an even amount of time, energy, connections. And you shouldn't, I don't think you should try to measure it that way. I think you should try to measure it as, like, is it impacting the business, and are we aligned in the mission of what we're creating? And I think what we do really well is respect each other for what they bring to the business.
Such a good answer. You mentioned ego a little bit, and for you to be in your lane, and for both of those guys to be in their respective lanes, you've got to remove ego from the equation. For you personally, was that kind of hardwired into you, or was that a learned behavior over the course of time, over the course of business? Like, did you develop this muscle? I ask because, honestly, for me, I've been in like scenarios. I have a business partner in one specific business where the reality is, he's more attractive in the sense that he has more relationships, that he brings more revenue to the business. And so I recognize that. I'm aware of that. However, me 15 years ago might have struggled with that a little bit,
Sure.
like accepting that reality, because I accept that, I choose a different lane that I know I could excel in. And that's what makes for our partnership to be a strong
Yep.
one. But 15 years ago, I don't know if I would have done that. But
No,
maybe, I guess I'm curious with you, was this something you developed over time, or has this always been you?
100%. It's learning through failure, right? I had a great business in my early 30s. I left a management consulting gig, had a great business, but my partner and I fought for who should be the front person, right? And either one of us could have done it, right? But we weren't focusing on the end goal. We were focusing on, like, someone getting the credit in the moment, which just doesn't matter. I think as I got older, I realized, like, hey, if people come up to a Jesse or Colin and they get all the credit, like, it's amazing what you've created, right? And they are part of that creation. They should get that credit. But it's also tough for them because they're like, well, I didn't build the brand, and I didn't hire the team, and I didn't sign the contracts or build the business plan, but they talked about it and promoted it, right? And they helped sell the tickets, which you don't have an event if you don't have ticket sales,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Um, but I think what I realized is, like, I don't need that credit. My wife knows what I've done. My partners know what I've done. My kids know what I've done. My team know what I've done. And I know what they've done for me, right? And so I think that the flip side of that is, when I was younger, I wanted people to know what I had done. It was so important to my ego to know that, like, I wanted that credit. And now I'm like, the credit is that I have a friendship with you, Brian, and that you brought so many friends and clients to this event. Like, that's the gratitude that I feel, and that's the compensation that I need, right? And look, at the end of the day, no one knows what the cap table is. No one knows how profits are split up. But like that's how a lot of it plays out, right? And it's like that doesn't matter. And so if in public certain people get more recognition or more awareness for something, when I was younger, I didn't handle that well. As I've gotten older, it's actually been like, man, what an absolute asset I have in my partners. What an amazing thing. How can I channel more of that and let them go and do more with less asks of them, right?
Mhm.
Whereas 10, 15 years ago, I would have been like, well, I worked an 80-hour week. What did my partner do? Right. And I think it's because I found partners that filled in areas where I wasn't as strong. So I'm grateful for what they bring to the table and vice versa. Whereas, like, if you partner with someone that has like your same skill set, it's very difficult because you're always measuring each other versus what the other one is bringing to the table, right? But if you provide certain things that your partner doesn't, they're grateful for that and vice versa. And I think that's worked really well here. The other two guys are never supposed to be the operator, ever, right? It's just not it. Like, Jesse's a keynote speaker and writing books and whatever else the hell he's doing, creating. And Colin is creating world records and doing human first. What great stories to have tell to their audience about 29, right? But their job is never supposed to be anything in the day to day. And I think that is not the typical case for most partnerships. But you do need to think about what your partner is doing that you can't do as well and champion them for that and put them in a position to do more of that has worked really well for me.
Yeah, it's so smart. When I think around partnerships, like I've had the opportunity to analyze so many successful and unsuccessful partnerships, and I think a lot of times it comes down to two things. Number one, are we clear on expectations of one another? Like what's winning and
Yes.
losing look like in our respective roles? And then number two, are we actually communicating
Yeah.
like in a structured way with the proper cadence, et cetera? And I think you guys have probably done a fantastic job in managing that. But you've all grown throughout your business careers.
Yeah,
Like
without
you've
a
all
doubt. And
grown.
look, I think it's I've gotten much better at not letting resentment build. So not everything's perfect. And by the way, I need feedback and criticism too. And I remember a moment very early on with another business I was involved with Jesse, and I made a mistake. And it wasn't big, but I just didn't let another partner of ours, equity partner, know about something that I was doing. It wasn't a conflict of the business. It wasn't a conflict ethically or anything. It was just like, it would have been a nice thing to just say, hey, oh, you know what, Brian, I'm going to go pursue this. And if you ever see it, I want to let you know why I'm doing it. And I just remember the way Jesse handled it. It was like, hey, you know what? Like, you didn't do anything wrong, but there was a better way to do this. And Brian would have really appreciated had you handled it this way. And I'm giving you this feedback because I know you'll accept it. I know you want to handle things the best way possible. And I just remember like old business partners of mine would have been like, what the F, man? Like, are you kidding me? You blindsided our partner. Like, what did you do? And so when there have been times with Colin or Jesse where I was like, oh, that didn't feel great. I didn't just let resentment build. I was like, hey, you know what? It would have been awesome if when you had this opportunity, you could have just plugged 29. You didn't do anything wrong, but man, what a great opportunity it would have been to present something that we were doing. And oh, by the way, that's on me. That's on me as the CEO for not prepping you, for not asking you to do that ahead of time. It's not your fault. I'm not pointing the finger at you. I'm taking accountability for saying, hey, I'm sorry I didn't let you know that this was coming and I didn't give you an opportunity to do so. So I'm also thinking about how can I always be doing my job better or communicating with my partners better, even if I think there's missed opportunities by them. It's probably because I didn't ask of it or I didn't communicate to them or put them in a position where they knew that was important to me. And that's probably the thing I have to work the most on is I work so autonomously. I'm not going to them that often.
Yeah.
And I need to go to them more and keep them clued into what we're doing as a business because they love it and they want to help promote it, but they need to understand that from me to make that happen.
There's so many good things you said there. That very tail end, though, really kind of struck home for me because I like to operate autonomously too. You know, I shut my door, I lock myself away. I'm highly efficient. I'm married to my calendar, but I also got to take a step back and think, man, what am I doing that's impacting others? And am I communicating it appropriately? Am I managing expectations? It's just a really good call out.
Yeah.
So let's talk about you a little bit more. We talked about the business and partnerships, the amazing community that you've created, but part of the reason I have you here is because 29 on 29 is your focus right now. You've built and exited multiple businesses. You've had massive success over over your career, and you're still a pretty young dude. So you're doing some things right, and I want to ask you a series of questions to really unpack what's made you you. One thing that we talk about here at No Days Off, I'm a firm believer that if you want to be successful, then you've got to be. This is going to sound strange. You got to be weird. In other words, when you study successful people, what you find is that they're doing things different than most everybody else around them. Maybe their morning looks different, or their calendar looks different, or what they're learning is that whatever it may be, when you look at the greatest, they're perceived as weird because they're different than everybody else around them. So I take a lot of pride in being weird. And so I
Sure.
want to ask you, Mark, this is a weird question, right, to start with, but I wanted to ask you, what are you doing personally each day or week that others, if they were observing your world, would say, damn, that's weird. Like what he's doing there is weird. What are you doing in your world that others might categorize as weird?
Man, you're going to learn a few things about me that I'm not sure you want to know, but I'll in the interest of being transparent and authentic, I'm going to give you two things. So one is, I think a lot of people talk about multitasking, right? But they're talking about being on a call and sending a text at the same time, right? Or answering an email while being on a Zoom that's unimportant. I think I take multitasking to another level, and that's not from an efficiency hack. It's, I mean, this is a little bit ego, but it's like, look at what I can do, right? So, meaning, I'll do a bike workout while on a call, right? But I don't take video calls almost ever because I don't want people to know what I'm doing. I sauna while on calls. I've showered while on calls, right? And I've mastered the ability of like mute, unmute, and like what activities I can get done because it makes me feel a little bit like I did something personally for myself. So it's not answering emails, it's not work related. I'm doing personal health and wellness related things while I'm on calls. And I actually find that I'm more attentive because I'm walking, I'm rucking, right? Or I'm on, and when I'm on a bike, I'm indoors on a trainer, right? But I'm specifically thinking it actually gets my mind and blood flow working better. I think I have better ideas. I'm more attentive to the call. I'm not looking at social media. I'm not answering an email. I'm very in tune, but my body is getting a workout, right? And I think at the end of the day, like that's something I'm really proud of like, I just didn't sit at my desk, right? I got actual work done. So that's one area is like I'm constantly pushing the limits of like what can I do while I'm on a call that's going to make that outcome better but make me better. And then the other one is
Well,
I'm
real quick, you sound
yeah,
like the original treadmill desk. Like
yeah,
that's
a little
all the
bit,
rage right now is people have
100%.
treadmills at their desk.
Yeah,
You've been doing this well before that.
for a long time. For a long time. Like I'm the guy that honestly people are like, wait, we're not on video. And I'll just joke, like, you don't need to see my face. Like, I'm not that handsome. You know what I mean? Like, why do you want to see me? Like, let's just have the conversation. And I don't mean it in a disrespectful way. It's just kind of like, there's other things I need to do that are actually going to make this call better, too. So that's one. Uh, the other is I'm really sophomoric with my humor. And I know that doesn't sound weird, but like, I had one of our biggest clients the other day reach out at 29 and say, hey, um, I need a favor. Me and my client are doing this event. We need to transfer to this event. And like it would mean the world to him if we could transfer from this location to this location. He's like, but before he could get to that, he said, I need a really big favor. And I just wrote back, you want nudes? Right? Like this is a guy like I don't even probably really know like all that well, right? And it was just like, what? Like, no, I don't want nude photos of you. And I know that sounds ridiculous, but it's like if you can't have fun doing business, if you can't have fun every day doing things and understanding like look there are boundaries, right? But I like to kind of push them and keep things on a much more playful side. I wouldn't say that if that was a female that asked, right? But it's a dude that like I've gotten to know, we've worked out together and sauna together and stuff. And I think it's just trying to always keep it fun. So like 8 times out of 10, the first thing that pops into my head is what I'm going to text or is what I'm going to say because it's authentic. And I just feel like, hey, if you get the choice to do business with me, who's going to joke and keep it lighthearted and fun, or someone else who's going to be really serious, but we're both going to deliver, I think most of the time you're going to lean towards a person that makes it fun, right? And if you're not, I probably don't want to do business with you either, right? Because like we're just not going to gel in that manner because I don't want to be that buttoned up. And to me, there are certainly some weird things that I do around that I feel like has led to a deep connection with people because they understand who I am right away. Like there's no pretense, there's no lipstick put on it. Like, you're going to get what you're going to get.
One thing I'm thinking about is as you're sharing, and those are two great shares. I love it. It's so funny when I talk to high achievers because you start to believe like what you're doing every day is actually normal.
Right.
It's not weird. Like for example, Marc, you're like a sauna guy. Like you're in a sauna all the time. And I know your partner's Jesse
Yeah.
specifically. Like I think he's going over to Europe to do like some
Sure.
sauna tour. I
Tour.
don't
Yeah.
anyhow, like you're thinking about a sauna or you and I have chatted before at Metrics and you left a pretty significant corporate gig to go like you just said, you know what? It's time to go be this entrepreneur. To most, they look at that and they're like 99% of people would never do that. Like that's super weird. So it's interesting to just see a guy like I've gotten to know you a little bit. No, dude, you're weird as can be in the greatest of ways, but you normalize it, right? And
Yeah.
and so it's so good. Now, when we talk about your journey as a business person, did you ever have I guess a lack of confidence or some degree of insecurity when you began building your business career?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think there's certainly like that imposter syndrome that's come in numerous times of like, man, like, do I deserve to be here? Is this the right forum? I would say when I first joined YPO, for those who don't know, like Young Presidents Organization, right? You have to have a business that's doing like 14 million or more in revenue or payroll more than $2 million or whatever. And I remember like when I had actually a handful of businesses under a holding company that were big enough to join, I remember being in the room and being like, I just barely got in here. I don't deserve to be in this room. And then I joined a forum, which is a group of 8 of other people in my industry. And it's 2 CEOs of NBA franchises. It's the CEO of the US Open Tennis Association. I mean, they are like ballers. And I remembered like, I'm the small entrepreneur in the room and not knocking any of them, but I brought a lot of value to the table. And I didn't have that confidence when I first joined. And now I realize, like, wait, I'm approaching this from a completely different perspective. I'm not running $1 billion business. I don't have hundreds of employees. I don't have to deal with labor unions and these huge contract disputes that take place in MLB and all these other types of stuff. But I approach problems from a different manner, right? Because I'm in them every day and I can't just pass them off to other people. And that's not saying they're not dealing with them. It's just much different when you kind of own and operate every aspect of your business versus those that kind of came into a very large organization and have all these pieces put in place. They have a lot of responsibility. They have much bigger problems, but they also are able to, and maybe not always in the best way, they're able to delegate a lot more. And a lot of those things don't even get to them. And what I realized was you can lack some creativity when it comes to that. You can think that there's only one or two solutions here, whereas I think there's tons of solutions, right? And I'm willing to brainstorm them all day long. So I didn't always have the confidence. But I think what I've learned over time is that I'm very self aware about what I am good at and what I'm not, when I should speak and when I should not speak. And that's something I didn't have earlier. And I think that does lead to a lack of confidence because you're trying to think of like, how do I ask a smart question? Or how do I look smart in this room? And sometimes the way to look really smart is just not to ask a dumb question. Like just sit there and listen and observe. And as I've gotten older, I think if that confidence has helped build of like, hey, here's what I'm good at, and here's where I know I'm weak or not as good at, and knowing when to speak and not in those situations.
It's really good. It's really thoughtful. I mean, again, it makes me think about just again ego and how we've learned and how we had like experiences kind of shaped these decisions and these choices or the way that we're living today. When you think about, and I've got, not just a lot of entrepreneurs here, but a lot of parents. And as parents, and you're a parent of 13 and 15-year-old, and you said your job is to
Yep.
make them in the best men you could possibly make them. When you think about your upbringing, and we chatted a little bit, I know how much you care about your parents. When you think about your upbringing, were there skills that you learned growing up, whether it be from your parents or sports or whatever, that supported you through the growth phases, through the challenges, the high stakes, all of that? Was there just things you were brought up with that made you who you are and led to your success today?
Yeah, I mean, I actually wrote these down as I know you gave me a little bit of a heads up around a couple of the things that we were going to discuss. Like, there's just no substitute for hard work, right? Like, I cannot tell you the amount of times my dad told me, like, there's no wrong way to do the right thing, right? Like, just do it right, do it hard, give your best effort. And like, I always just tell my kids, and this is something Jesse, tells his kids, like, reward the effort, not the result. Like, just give your best effort, right? Be willing to fail, put yourself in that situation. So I think it's like the amount of things that I've had success from just doing hard work, right? Like, there's just no substitute for it. Like, there's no downside to it, right? I think that's the thing of discipline. Um, Relationships are a form of leverage, right? Like, I just have seen over the course of my career, reflecting back to what I think my parents did really well, is that, when you invest in relationships, it becomes really easy to do business with people, to trust later on, right? Because you have that. For Jesse and I and Colin to sell the business and then buy it back together, it became so much easier each time to do something because we trusted each other. We knew what we'd been through. We knew what we were aligned to go and do. And I think I learned that very early on, was that my dad in business just had unbelievable relationships. And he is fun to work with. A lot of the weirdness and quirkiness that I get came from my dad, and people wanted to do business with him. And then dovetailing into that, like, be someone who gives energy and doesn't take it. I just observed a lot growing up around those that always asked for something versus being someone who just gave more. And I think my parents always gave more in every situation. And by the way, I'm not saying money, like, gave more time, gave more support, um, gave more happiness or joy being around them. And I always wanted to be that person that just you'd rather be around. And like, if I call you and the phone rings, right, man, Mark's gonna lift me up. I'm having a bad day, I want to answer the phone. Not like, what does Mark want now? He's asking for something, right? If ever in business I'm doing something, I want people to feel like I'm providing them an opportunity. I'm granting them access, truly, not I'm asking for a sale. Mark's here to tell me something, try to sell me something I don't want or need. It's more like, I hope it's, well, I can't wait to see what Mark's got next, right? And that's just something I feel like comes from being someone who gives more energy than they take, which was certainly something I observed growing up.
Well, those are two, like, there's no wrong way to do the right thing. I wrote that one down.
Yeah.
That's so good. And then to be the one giving energy and not taking it is such a powerful statement. I know I say a lot of times, like, make sure you're around people that bring you up and give you energy, and you eliminate those relationships that zap it.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
it makes me think about that quote. Now, I think I think you're around my age, like mid 40s, in that, or you're early 40s, I think, still.
At 44 is probably mid.
Yeah, I think you're still early. We'll take that as
All
early.
right,
I
I'll
got
take
you at
early.
46.
Yeah.
If you can go back to, let's say, age 30, right? So 14 years ago for you. If you could give that 30-year-old Mark some advice with all the wisdom and the experience that you have now, what advice would you give that guy?
I would give the advice that one of my dear friends gave to me, a guy named Ray Hicks, who's one of the best entrepreneurs I've ever met. It's a big cup and we can all drink from it. He's a Southern guy from Alabama. And the way he framed it was just like, hey, we're all here competing against each other. You're all thinking everything's a fight, business is war. And like, at the end of the day, man, like, there's plenty of ways to make money. There's enough good to go around for everyone. Like, approach it in a way where you cheer for others when they win and you don't think, why not me? Like, truly be happy for Brian that he's crushing it, right? Don't worry about the circumstance and the luck that you don't know what he's done before then, right? But when I was in my 30s, I got too hung up in like, I'm outworking that guy. I'm smarter than him, right? I'm doing all these things. Why did he get the exit, or why would happen? And I think what changed 15 years later was like, I'm measuring the wrong things, right? Like, I'm happy. Like, I wouldn't give up anything to go back 15 or 20 years. I mean, I would give that advice. I don't want to be younger. I've lived life without regret. Like, I have not wasted 1 second with my wife or kids. I'm present with them. I love the way we do things. But I was comparing myself to the wrong things when I was early on. The vision that we had at 29, the alignment of partners of the life that we wanted, I wouldn't have done that at 30. I wouldn't have been trying to maximize time with kids. I would have been trying to maximize a number to tell people I sold a business for $100 million. Well, great. You missed 10 years of your kid's life, right? So I think that perspective would be, I would just, if I did go back, I would say, hey, look, it's important to realize that like everybody's got their own reasons for winning and doing things, and cheer their wins on and realize like you can win too in your own way. And it's not some zero sum game.
Yeah, I love it. Now, when you think about all the accomplishments you've had, a lot of people know about, these big things you've done. But is there something that people don't know about you that you're really proud of? That most don't
Uh,
know about you?
well, I don't really want to talk much about myself, but like, I don't think there are two better kids on the planet than my two boys. And that's not to say there aren't great parents, but my kids care about other people. They're smart, they're loyal, they're hardworking. Um, I'm so proud of the kids that my wife and I've raised. I think about like accomplishments. I mean, if anything, I'm just trying to show them what they're capable of. Like so much of my desire right now of doing things is to show to them, like, look, a year ago I sucked at the guitar, and now I'm like less sucking, right? Like I'm still not great, but I'm not giving up. And like you can do that. And it means so much more when they see me doing things. So I don't know if people understand the level of which, like, it's not a talking point. Like, at the end of the day, I'm most proud of our kids and what they're doing and who they are and the people that they are, far more than anything that I've accomplished from a business or wealth creating or anything like that. If anything, those are just granting me more opportunities to spend more time with my kids, right? It's the difference between being rich and wealthy is, in my mind, is like wealthy people have an opportunity to truly have the freedom of time. And if there's any goal that I'm trying to have, it's like I want the freedom of time as I get older to choose where and when I spend time with my kids when they have their families, right? I don't want to accumulate assets that are a drain on my time and energy, or put myself in debt for a lifestyle that's not going to bring me happiness. So it all kind of relates back to making choices and understanding what brings me true fulfillment and happiness. And right now, for sure, it's around things with my immediate family, my parents that I'm really close with, my in-laws. Like those are the things that I want to maximize for, and I'm most proud of kind of the life that we have together.
I love it. Just to be super clear, like as in terms of action item, it sounds like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it sounds like in terms of what you've done to influence the kids in the way that you have, a lot of that is modeling the behavior that or modeling specific things that you want them to see, you want them to observe and incorporate into their world in some capacity, their
Yeah,
own version of that. But it sounds like it's a lot of just behaving as you hope they would behave.
yeah. Look, like this red hat, which is what you get for climbing 29,029 feet at a 29 or 29 in that. It doesn't just happen. My kids get to see me wake up and work out every day, and I make sure to tell them I'm purposely going outside when it's 14. I'm not working out. We have two treadmills in our basement. I'm not going on either one of those, kids, right? Like I literally tell that to them. Doesn't matter what I'm telling you. They see it. They see me come in, that I'm frozen, there's sweat frozen in my face, whatever. And they're like, man, that must have been hard. And I'm like, yeah, well, that makes the reward that much better, right? So your kids see that stuff. The outside world just sees the finish line, right? Especially if you post on Instagram, they're only seeing the success. They don't see everything that went into it. And I think that's why, like, that lesson from my buddy Ray Hicks about it, cheer on other successes. I don't know what you did to build your business. I don't know what you went through. I don't know what you sacrificed. So if you have some huge win, it's not like, man, Brian's not that impressive. You are really impressive, but I don't know what it took to get there. So I think it's celebrating those things because it's the day to day reps, the no days off that you talk about, that it takes to have that type of pride in the accomplishment at the end of the day. And I think that's what I think your kids see on a day to day basis that no one else sees. Your wife sees it, or your husband sees it, your kids see it. No one else sees what you're doing on the day to day. And so if you live that kind of life, I do think by nature, they think that's normal. My kids think sauna, cold plunge, working out in rough conditions, they think that's normal. It's
Yeah.
weird, right? But it gives them a confidence that they can do things too and to be their own person, right? And that's, I think, that own self confidence to just like be who you are. I just want them to be happy with themselves. And I think you gain that confidence from doing those things that other people don't do and then realizing that, like, that actually looks pretty cool, right? Because you're not doing what everyone else does. And that's tough for teenagers to do. Really tough.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. It's really, really good guidance. All right, I have one final question for you. The setup for it is a little long, so bear
Yep.
with me. I borrowed this from Lewis Howes, who I think is an awesome podcaster and asks some great questions. And I love this question he asks. Imagine, Mark, that you get to go for 100 or so more years and you get to accomplish everything that you've ever wanted to accomplish. You get to create everything you've ever wanted to create. The stories, the speeches you do, the podcasts you do, the books you're probably going to write, all this stuff comes together. But for whatever reason in this hypothetical situation, all of your content goes away with you. So this interview we're doing right now is gone. The speeches you've given at 29 oh 29, those things are gone. Anything you put out in the world, social media, whatever, it's all gone. There's no more access to your content. But on the final day, you get to leave behind a few lessons, 3 lessons. And this is all we'll ever have of you, Mark. We're going to call it, Lewis calls it the 3 truths. What would be those 3 truths for you?
Number one, you have to define your own happiness. The second is that the highest form of leverage in the world is your reputation. And the third is, God, sorry, I got emotional. The only measure of success that matters is how your wife and kids look at you.
Those are 3
Yeah,
powerful lessons.
yeah. Sorry, I got emotional thinking about it, but like, it matters so much to me, like that I'm someone that my wife is proud to be married to, and that my kids are like, yeah, I like who my dad is, right? Like, um, so I think that has obviously weaved through our discussion because it's so many of the things that I value. The decisions that I'm making in running the business should be supporting those things that I value at the end of the day that I think are making me happy. And that to me, the little bit that I can do is making the world a little bit better place, right? And if those things align and I'm able to communicate to my partners and they know who I am, that's why we work in harmony. It's not always perfect, but I think it helps that alignment from the beginning.
Wow. Uh, I did let you know I might be asking a question like that.
Yeah, yeah.
And your answer is unbelievable in terms of those 3. I got to ask, what was that underwriting process for you when you were thinking through those 3? Was that hard for you? Or those things already at the top of your mind? Did you have to go on multiple runs and think through what are these 3 things I'm going to leave on this planet? Or was that just
So
natural for you?
what's really interesting is I had 3 written down that I spent a lot of time with, and I only said one of them when you asked me the question. Right? So I think it's the basis of our conversation led me to be like, no, like that's not it. Right? Like, and so 2 of the things that I mentioned, the truths actually rose up through our discussion. But it's tough, man, because I think it's you want something when you're asked this kind of question. I think there's a part of you and it's ego related where you're like, oh, I want to say something impactful that's different. You don't want to repeat what someone else has said, right? But I also want to think about like what are those things that have truly shaped who I am. And I think the question talking about who I was at 30 and 44, I thought about like, well, what are those 3 things that have actually changed the most, right? When I was 30, Chase was 1. He's 15 now, right? So many of the decisions that I made were based off of like how my sons were looking at me and how my wife looks at me, right? And so I think my last answer wasn't even written down, but it came out through this interview. And the underwriting process is tough. I think it really is great to be introspective and think about why you are the way that you are and really what message you're sending to other people, right? So I thank you for asking it because I think it's something that's important for me to kind of understand where I'm at right now and then say, hey, if that's how I feel now, I need to really like double and triple down on those things over the next 40, 50 years, right? Like those are the areas where I need to go really deep on because I like this version of me a lot better than I do when I was 30.
This has been such a good conversation. I know that our audience is going to love unpacking all that you discussed here. And Mark, I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but after we air this podcast, I'm going to spend a few days digging a little deeper into some of the things you said. And damn, my agenda is loaded now
Uh,
because
I-
there's so many things here that you
yeah.
said that are original and that are meaningful to you. You could see it, I could feel it. Uh, there's a lot of conversation for us to have here, man. You are one spectacular dude, and I really, really appreciate you spending an hour with us. Before I let you go, how can my audience, how can our listeners best support you, your businesses, all that you guys are up to? How do we support that or even learn more about what you're up to?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. Look, like I hope that you all follow and join us to hike one time with us. 29 and 29, just Google it, will be the first results. 29 and 29 everstein.com. And then, yeah, I don't post a lot on social, but my social is Marc 29029. And, I think the biggest thing you can do to support is like be part of someone else's journey, right? Like put something big on your goal, on your calendar. But man, the feeling it is to be able to support someone on theirs, like that's where I feel like I'm best as a leader at 29. Is that's really what I'm doing. I'm giving people an opportunity to tell a story, and it feels really good when you do it. So put something big on your calendar, and then pay it back and support someone when they're doing something big for themselves.
Marc, I owe you one, man. I really
Awesome,
appreciate
brother.
you hanging out with
Yeah,
us.
thank you,
Thank you
brother.
so much.
Love it.
And on that note, guys, we'll wrap up. Thank you so much for being here, the No Days Off podcast. I love everybody spending time with us. It means the world. Committing an hour listening to what we have to share. Do me a favor. Remember, every single day brings you a new opportunity to get better. So let's all get after it.